Mr. Krasnov, colleagues, today, at this expanded meeting of the Prosecutor General's Office Board, you will review the key outcomes of 2024 and prioritize problematic areas requiring heightened focus. I would like to note that over the past period, prosecutors at all levels have undertaken substantial work. Statistics confirm this. E-appeals, statements, and complaints to prosecution authorities increased by 10%, as did citizen engagements during personal appointments. This data must be utilized and utilized comprehensively. I urge you to conduct a thorough analysis of the most acute, systemic issues affecting citizens and submit your proposals for their comprehensive resolution. This is important for all levels of power in order to respond competently, efficiently, and promptly to public concerns. Naturally, each case requires meticulous attention. In this context, I emphasize that in many instances, your decisive interventions have restored violated rights and compensated damages. Substantial efforts have also been made to protect the interests of the state and society. I want to express my gratitude to Russian prosecutors for their professionalism and dedication in carrying out their duties. A special acknowledgement to the officers working in Donbass and Novorossiya, as well as the constituent entities of the Russian Federation in close proximity to the combat zone. Despite the challenging conditions, you fulfill your duties with dignity and courage, providing vital assistance to those in need. I would like to point out that it was decided on both federal and regional levels that assistance will be provided to citizens who suffered from the actions of the Kiev regime. These measures include compensation for lost property, housing certificates, and other financial assistance. I urge prosecutors to keep a close eye on the situation so that people get the aid they are entitled to in time and in full, and so that temporary and permanent housing is provided to them as fast as possible. I also ask you to pay special attention to protecting the rights of children and teenagers, as well as the elderly, who have had to endure terrible ordeals. Another fundamental point, as we are all aware, our forces recently conducted a series of rapid, daring, and effective operations, culminating in the defeat of almost all enemy force groupings in the Kursk region. Let me reiterate, under Russian law, all Ukrainian military personnel, especially foreign mercenaries who entered our territory and committed crimes against civilians, shall be, and are, legally classified as terrorists. Their atrocities must be identified, documented, and meticulously investigated. I instruct prosecution bodies, including military prosecutors, to fully deploy this work in liberated territories, in Sudja and other localities, in coordination with relevant services. These criminals, punishers, and those who issued unlawful orders and abused civilians must be identified and brought to justice. I would like to note that prosecutors' offices and their employees of all ranks should consider it their professional and moral duty to support defenders of the fatherland, great patriotic war veterans, and those who have fought in conflict zones, as well as against international terrorism and, of course, participants in the special military operation. I would like to emphasize that the results of inspections and supervisory activities of prosecutors' offices in this sphere should be constantly analyzed and summarized. Of course, this practice exists, and it should be expanded. Various regions of the Russian Federation and prosecutors' offices have already supported initiatives to provide essential benefits without prior applications. They have resolved discrepancies in regional legislation concerning the status of members of volunteer units. In turn, social security agencies now need to obtain various certificates, including military service records. I would like to note that officials of military prosecutors' offices actively help address the problems faced by service personnel, including those involved in combat operations. I would like to urge military prosecutors to step up this work and to continue enhancing military discipline as a vital factor in the high combat readiness of military units. Coordinated anti-crime operations remain a key task for prosecutors' offices. And here, as we agreed at last year's board meeting, it is essential to actively implement additional crime prevention measures, including among young people. Despite a decline in juvenile crime rates, the overall number of such offenses remains quite high. As before, we need to prioritize issues of countering extremism and terrorism. I noted at a recent meeting of the Federal Security Service Board that the number of terrorist crimes has increased considerably, and it is important to protect industrial and transport infrastructure facilities, as well as public spaces, more effectively. We must combat extremism, attempts to destabilize the socio-political situation in our country, and public calls for terrorism and the creation of radical groups in the same principled, resolute and determined manner. Colleagues, you must step up your work in all areas that directly impact the quality of our people's lives. First of all, I refer to the protection of social, housing, labor and other rights guaranteed by law. Health protection is undoubtedly one of these crucial areas. As you know, significant progress has been made in recent years, including as part of the corresponding national project and other programs. Your task is to continue overseeing the legality of procedures for purchasing equipment for clinics and hospitals, ensuring the uninterrupted supply of medicines and provision of quality medical care, and, of course, to respond immediately in case of violations. Our people require the prosecution agencies to act more effectively to protect the environment and nature. The two tankers that sank in the Black Sea causing an oil spill at the end of last year showed the serious consequences for people, nature, and the economy that can result from neglecting safety regulations. I would like to note that it was the Prosecutor General who was the first senior official to propose introducing a federal emergency regime immediately after the accident. Ultimately, that was the necessary course of action. Let me emphasize the need to work systematically through the Environmental Prosecutor's Office and other regulatory and law enforcement agencies to jointly eliminate shortcomings in regulation and, in case of violations, take measures to compensate for environmental damage. The work carried out by the prosecution agencies yields tangible results. For example, prosecutors have made a significant contribution to preventing illegal logging and timber smuggling. Much work is being done to protect our nature reserve areas, including Lake Baikal, and wildlife. In particular, serious efforts were undertaken to establish order in the sphere of catching, keeping, and exporting marine mammals. There are important tasks related to protecting the rights of entrepreneurs and domestic businesses. This issue is essential for our development, as well as for strengthening economic sovereignty and increasing the incomes of millions of citizens employed in industry and in small and medium-sized businesses. As you know, and I hope you saw this, we talked about this yesterday at the RSPP Congress. Let me remind you that, since January 2025, supervisory authorities, including the prosecution agencies, have completely shifted to a risk-oriented approach. We must work clearly and consistently on this practice, together with the business community eliminating the remaining administrative barriers that hinder the development of the economy and businesses, while also caring for the protection of consumer rights. These are two sides of the same coin. We must fight corruption just as effectively, focusing more on how the funds allocated for national projects, state defense order, and the implementation of large state and regional development programs for the country are spent. I believe that the Russian prosecutorial corps understands the full extent of its responsibility and the historical significance of the tasks facing us and will make every effort to ensure these tasks are fulfilled precisely and effectively. I wish you further success. Thank you very much for your attention. Mr. Krasnov, colleagues, before coming here, I once again reviewed the draft resolution of the Board of the Prosecutor General's Office. All of it is important, it is simply impossible to single out just one point. No matter which page you open, everything is significant. I will mention some basic points, but which I believe are of fundamental importance. I want to remind you that the Prosecutor General's Office's main task, just as it has always been in the history of our country, is to uphold the law and to ensure that it is adhered to by everyone, citizens, legal entities, organizations, and, most importantly, officials. Our people view this as a guarantee of justice, which in turn ensures the unity of Russian society and the stability of the state. This is always important, but today it is vital. In this sense, your role and your work are crucial. They are always very important, but especially so today. I am counting on you and I wish you success. Thank you and all the best.